As my heir, William now assumes the Scottish titles which have meant so much to me. He succeeds me as Duke of Cornwall.
What if the most powerful woman in media looked back at the one interview that defined a decade and quietly admitted it was the biggest mistake of her career? Not on stage, not in a press conference, not even in some carefully worded social media post. It slipped out behind closed doors, in a conversation that was never supposed to leave the room. Just one heavy, quiet line about Meghan Markle, Duchess of Sussex. "I should have never trusted her." That sentence didn't stay private for long. It spread fast, and when it did, it set off a chain of events that nobody in Hollywood saw coming. Tonight, we're pulling back the curtain on nearly 3 years of silence, private conversations, behind-the-scenes fallouts, and the slow, quiet unraveling of one of the most talked-about media relationships of our time. And trust me, by the time we get to the end of this, you're going to see that entire interview in a completely different light. To understand how we got here, you have to go back to the beginning. Back to that sun-soaked garden in Montecito, California, where Oprah Winfrey opened her home and her platform to Meghan and Prince Harry. This wasn't a rushed sit-down or a quick press junket. Oprah gave them everything. Time, space, zero pushback from producers, no hard follow-up questions, no time limits. Meghan spoke openly, emotionally, and without restriction. She shared her claims, painted her version of events, and reshaped her entire public narrative in front of an audience of millions watching across the world. At the time, people called it historic, a cultural reset, a defining media moment that shifted conversations everywhere about race, mental health, and the inner workings of the British royal family. The ratings were massive, the reaction was immediate, and Oprah, as always, was right at the center of it. But behind that polished, carefully controlled image, small cracks were already starting to show. People close to the production noticed them early. Even then, quiet whispers began circulating that Oprah felt something was off. And now, with new details starting to surface, those early doubts are beginning to make a lot more sense. Let's start with what happened on set. Because one of the most discussed moments from that interview wasn't about race or royal protocol or mental health. It was about a blanket. Meghan had shared a story about one of her early outings with the Queen, describing it as a warm, grandmotherly moment where Her Majesty noticed Meghan might be cold and placed a blanket over her knees as well. It was a small detail on the surface, but it carried real emotional weight. It was meant to humanize the relationship, to show closeness and care between Meghan and the Queen at a time when so much of the narrative was centered on tension and rejection. The story landed well. Viewers found it touching, but then someone with sharp eyes went back to the footage from that actual outing and noticed something that quietly complicated the whole thing. Looking at a wider angle from the car, it appeared that the Queen had only placed the blanket on her own lap, not across Meghan's knees, not as a shared gesture, just her own. A small detail, yes. But in the context of everything that followed, it was the kind of thing that made people start paying closer attention to everything else. And Oprah, according to people close to her, was already paying attention before that footage ever surfaced publicly. Reports suggest Oprah's doubts started almost immediately after filming wrapped. She had invited Meghan and Harry to share their truth, their words, their experience. But what she allegedly observed off-camera left her far more unsettled than anyone expected. A former Harpo assistant later claimed that Oprah told people within her inner circle just days after the broadcast aired, "This wasn't journalism, this was PR. I handed them the mic and they ran with it." Not long after that, fact-checkers began pointing out inconsistencies that were difficult to dismiss. Palace aides quietly leaked details that complicated parts of the story. Public opinion started shifting back and forth rapidly. Some people believed every word. Others began looking at the interview in a very different way. But Oprah stayed silent, and that silence did not feel accidental. Then came the chicken coop. On screen, it was one of the warmer moments of the entire special. Meghan and Harry walking through their Montecito property, past a rustic wooden coop, a simple wire fence, and a handmade sign reading "Archie's Chickens." It looked warm, real, and effortlessly down to earth. The kind of moment that humanizes people who live behind gates. For viewers at home, it felt authentic. But according to a former CBS affiliate editor, Oprah watched the final cut of the interview 2 days before it aired. The first time, she sat in complete silence. The second time, her concerns began building. She reportedly told a producer, "This won't age well." And it wasn't the big royal allegations or the emotional confessions that made her uneasy. It was specifically that scene with the chickens, because Oprah immediately recognized what that carefully constructed moment was designed to do: make Meghan and Harry seem warm, relatable, ordinary, which is a perfectly reasonable goal for a public relations team. But when Oprah later found out the fence had reportedly been refreshed and the coop repainted just days before filming, the whole setup started to feel less like a candid glimpse into their life and more like a produced scene. Calculated, constructed, controlled. She allegedly shared a thought with someone close to her. They don't want transparency, they want control. And that realization, according to insiders, created the first real crack in her confidence. But it wasn't even close to being the most shocking moment. What happened as the crew was packing up their equipment is what really changed things. According to a senior Harpo assistant, as the lights were dimming and the set was being broken down, Meghan reportedly approached a staff member privately, not to express gratitude, not to say thank you for the time or the platform. Instead, she allegedly made a request that raised eyebrows immediately. "Just make sure I get a look at the final edit. Oprah will understand." The staff member, caught completely off guard, passed the message directly to Harpo's executive producer, who then brought it straight to Oprah herself. And Oprah's response was immediate, clear, and left absolutely no room for ambiguity. Absolutely not. "This is my platform, not Buckingham's, not Meghan's. No guest, not even sitting presidents or global leaders, had ever asked for that level of editorial control before." But reportedly, the request didn't stop there. Later that same evening, an intermediary followed up on Meghan's behalf with another ask. The final framing, they said, should align with her truth. And that phrase, her truth, is said to have irritated Oprah more than almost anything else throughout the entire experience. For decades, Oprah built her reputation on exactly the opposite of that. Raw, unfiltered, honest conversations that cut through public relations spin. And now, from her perspective, this once-in-a-generation interview was starting to feel like a managed media project being shaped and controlled behind the scenes. Insiders say Oprah's trust began fading fast after that. She started quietly creating distance. Not loudly, not publicly, just gradually pulling back in the way that powerful people in Hollywood do when they've made a decision they're not ready to announce. And then came the message from Gayle King. Just days after the interview aired, while social media was still exploding with reactions, Oprah received a text from her closest friend. At first, it simply read, "You weren't the only one. She worked. Just wait." Oprah initially assumed Gayle was referring to network executives or producers who had complicated feelings about the broadcast. But then came the follow-up message. Meghan had reportedly pitched Gayle the exact same concept, almost word for word. A documentary-style project, a 3-part redemption arc following Meghan's journey through motherhood, philanthropy, and life after stepping away from the monarchy. And here's what made it land harder than anything else. According to insiders, Meghan had allegedly pitched that same idea to Oprah first. The overlap caught her completely off guard. "I thought I was helping her tell her story," Oprah reportedly told her inner circle. But she was helping herself build a brand. From that moment forward, Oprah's regret became personal. This was no longer just a professional situation that hadn't gone according to plan. It had started to feel like something closer to a betrayal from someone she genuinely believed she understood. And if you think that was the lowest point in this story, it goes even deeper. Because what Oprah allegedly heard next didn't just shake her as one of the most respected journalists in broadcasting history. It hit her on a human level. The kind of thing that stays with you. The kind of thing you don't easily move past. The final blow reportedly came from an unexpected place. Someone inside Meghan's own team. An unnamed stylist who had worked closely with Meghan during the final wardrobe fittings for the interview later came forward with details that were quiet but seriously damaging. This wasn't someone chasing attention. No book deal, no interviews, no social media reveal. The stylist didn't even want her name attached to any of it. But what she reportedly shared left a serious impression on the people who heard it. According to the stylist, Meghan came across as warm and charming while the cameras were rolling. Everything looked natural, polished, and effortless on screen. But the moment filming stopped and the glam team returned to the holding area, Her energy allegedly shifted in a way that was hard to miss. The stylist claimed Meghan started talking about the interview the way someone talks about a business transaction, rather than a personal moment. Oprah gives credibility. I give the story. That's the trade. And then came the detail that reportedly hit Oprah the hardest. The stylist alleged that Meghan even laughed about how easy it was to guide the emotional tone during filming. All I had to do was pause and look sad. Oprah would fill the silence. For a woman whose entire career, whose entire identity in media, has been built on creating genuine safe spaces for real emotion and real honesty, that kind of statement reportedly cut deeper than any public criticism ever had. If stories like this are what you want to keep hearing, make sure you're subscribed and have notifications turned on, because the breakdowns we have coming next go even further into these Hollywood power shifts. And this story isn't finished yet, because here's something that adds another layer entirely. Someone close to Prince Harry had actually tried to warn Oprah before the interview ever happened. About 3 weeks before filming, Oprah reportedly received a private message, not from media insiders, not from palace staff, from a longtime friend within Harry's own inner circle, someone known for staying completely out of the spotlight. The message was short, polite, but deeply unsettling. Please tread carefully. Meghan's truth is not the truth. You deserve to know that before you film. At the time, Oprah reportedly brushed it off. She had prepared thoroughly, done her research, and wasn't about to walk away from what would become one of the most talked about interviews of the decade, based on a vague, unverified warning. But after hearing what the stylist allegedly revealed, and after processing the messages from Gayle, Oprah reportedly admitted something privately to her closest team. I should have asked more questions. I didn't want to take her down, but that's exactly what I enabled. That quiet admission reportedly marked a turning point. The realization that she had overlooked serious warnings because she trusted Meghan started to weigh on her. And just when it seemed like it couldn't escalate further, one final piece of information reportedly reached Oprah that pushed everything over the edge. After the interview aired, Meghan's team had allegedly started quietly exploring opportunities for a second major tell-all. Another platform, another wave of revelations, another headline moment waiting to be deployed. But the detail that reportedly hit the hardest was a single phrase allegedly included in the pitch materials. Oprah wasn't enough. That sentence, according to sources, left Oprah feeling something she had never quite felt before in her decades-long career. Not just disappointed, not just professionally blindsided, used, strategically outmaneuvered by someone she had genuinely believed she was helping. In that moment, she reportedly realized she may not have been seen as a trusted interviewer at all. She had been a launching pad, a credibility boost, a stepping stone to whatever came next. And then came the phone call that reportedly changed everything. Just after 6 o'clock one evening, Oprah Winfrey picked up the phone, not to call Meghan, not to call Harry. She called her longtime executive producer. Her voice, according to sources, was calm but firm in a way that left absolutely no room for misunderstanding. I want it on the record. No more Meghan, no more Harry. We're done. When asked what changed, Oprah allegedly responded with a tone that carried real weight. I opened my platform in good faith. What they brought wasn't transparency, it was a performance. From that moment forward, everything shifted. And the way it shifted was not through loud headlines or dramatic public statements. It unfolded quietly, the way the most serious things in Hollywood always do. Through silence. Invitations reportedly stopped coming in. PR teams became harder to reach. Producers who had once spoken highly of Meghan began stepping back from any involvement. One insider at a major streaming platform summed it up simply, "If Oprah's out, we're out. It's not worth the risk." Hollywood, which had once embraced Meghan as a symbol of a modern, reinvented image, didn't turn against her with loud criticism. It pulled away with something far more damaging than criticism: indifference. The moment that reportedly had the strongest visible impact came weeks later at a high-profile charity gala. Meghan arrived appearing confident, moving through the VIP area as expected. But the response she encountered was noticeably different from anything she'd experienced before. 3 well-known actresses, described as former acquaintances, reportedly turned away as she approached. One was said to have told an assistant plainly, "Tell her I'm not available for photos tonight." But the clearest signal came at her table, where she noticed an empty seat beside her. That seat had been assigned to Viola Davis. Viola did not attend. According to reports, she had quietly requested a different seating arrangement after learning who she would be seated beside. At that point, the shift was impossible to ignore. In the weeks that followed, Meghan reportedly made several attempts to regain control of the situation. Quiet outreach through mutual contacts, carefully worded messages sent through publicists, indirect efforts to reconnect with people in Oprah's circle. But the responses, according to insiders, were either distant or simply never came at all. A producer close to Oprah claimed that one final message was eventually delivered through a mutual contact. Short, direct, and final. Trust once broken doesn't get airtime. What made that sentence land so hard was what it represented. Because for Meghan, the real impact wasn't public criticism. She dealt with that her entire time in the public eye. What hit harder was being quietly cut off from the very network she believed she had cultivated and could navigate freely. An industry that had once positioned her as a survivor was now, according to insiders, beginning to see her differently, as someone who had calculated too much and pushed too far. Partnerships that once seemed almost inevitable began to stall. Meetings were pushed back without explanation. The early excitement around certain projects quietly cooled off. Nothing was dramatically canceled, but the momentum that had been building clearly slowed down in a way that was difficult to reverse. From Meghan's perspective, the frustration was real. She had done what modern media often rewards: told her story, built her brand, captured public attention. But what she may have underestimated was how quickly perception shifts when the people who matter most start to feel uncertain. One insider claimed she expressed her frustration privately. "I thought people wanted honesty. I gave them honesty." But according to sources, the issue for most people in those conversations was never the story itself. It was how the story was managed, how it was shaped, packaged, and controlled. And that distinction, subtle as it sounds, made an enormous difference in how people responded behind closed doors. Public relations firms that had once competed to represent Meghan reportedly stepped back to reconsider. Studios that had shown quiet interest stopped scheduling meetings. Streaming platforms that had once hoped for a major Meghan project began placing ideas indefinitely on hold. Nothing official, no announcements, but the signal was clear to anyone paying attention. When Oprah Winfrey pulls back, Hollywood reads between the lines, and they remember. Because in this industry, everything is built on relationships, trust, timing, and the alliances you hold. And once those alliances begin to weaken, the shift can happen faster than anyone expects and become harder to recover from than almost anyone imagines. Oprah, meanwhile, made no public comments whatsoever, and that continued silence carried its own weight. Because in Hollywood, people pay close attention to who Oprah supports, but they pay even more attention to who she distances herself from. As one industry executive reportedly put it, "When Oprah steps back, people read between the lines. Nobody wants to be on the wrong side of that." Meghan Markle, once positioned as a symbol of reinvention and modern influence, wasn't facing a traditional scandal. She was facing something much harder to fight: fading relevance. And in an industry built entirely on relationships, perception, and trust, even one broken connection with the right person can quietly close doors that once felt like they'd never shut. That's the part of this story that doesn't make the front page. It doesn't come with a dramatic headline or a viral clip. It happens in private conversations, in unreturned messages, in meetings that never get scheduled. And once that narrative starts circulating through the right networks, it becomes nearly impossible to contain. What Oprah allegedly said in private may never be officially confirmed. But the pattern it set in motion, the silence, the distance, the shift in how an entire industry began to engage with Meghan Markle, that part is harder to deny. Because when someone at that level is believed to have said, "I should have never trusted her," people listen, and more importantly, they remember. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I want to know what you think really happened behind the scenes during that interview and whether Oprah made the right call in the end. Like the video if you found this breakdown worth watching. Share it with someone who follows this story. And if you're not already subscribed, hit that button now because the next one goes even deeper. We're just getting started.